What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the program. Welcome to the conversation. Have you ever heard the phrase from the movie Jerry Maguire? Quote, show me the money. End quote. And there's another phrase, quote, money makes the world go round. End quote. Recently, I started watching a series on Netflix. The series is called Titans. And it's a dramatic series with simulated characters and things of that nature. But the premise of it is dealing with and talking about the industrialist or the age of industrialization. It's talking about the titans, the entrepreneurs who controlled the world then and who are controlling the world now. It's time for individuals to understand, and that's why I've titled this program, It's About the Money. I'll be talking about the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund. And if you'd like more information, do like I did, go to congress.gov or www.congress.gov. Money is what makes the world go round. While individuals are arguing about Democrats, MAGA, Republicans, socialists, independents, at the end of the day, the commonality that binds them all together, it's called money. These individuals, the powerful, the rich, the billionaires who are running the world and the government as well, they sit down, they talk. At the end of the day, they're all friends. They're frenemies, quote unquote. And everyday people get caught up in the polarization, the debating about this, that, and the other thing, not realizing that the more important things that they should be dealing with and talking about, they don't. The upcoming midterm elections next year is going to be about one thing, the economy. That's it. Affordability, healthcare. It's going to be about money. So let's start talking here. Quote, according to congress.gov, quote, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, or the fund, is an international organization that works to ensure the stability of the international monetary system. Founded in 1945, its membership has grown from 30 countries to 149 countries today. The United States is a founding member of the IMF and the largest financial contributor. Congress shapes U.S. participation in the IMF through funding and authorization, legislation, as well as oversight activities. So, what are the key functions of the IMF? The IMF has evolved over its 80-year history in response to shifts in the global economy. Today, it performs three major factors: financial assistance, surveillance, and capacity development. See, what you don't know is what hurts you. I remember growing up, my favorite game was Monopoly because it dealt with real estate and it dealt with money. And it was a mind game, a game of strategy. And oftentimes individuals don't realize that in order to understand, how the world works, you have to understand about how money works, what money is and what money is not. Let's talk about the function of the financial assistance in the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund. The IMF extends market rate loans to countries facing economic crisis, um, distributing funds in phases or tranches after verifying that specified economic conditions and reforms have been met, quote, conditionality, End quote. The IMF also provides lines of credit to economically vulnerable countries with strong economic policies. So if you've ever wondered how countries become stabilized when they appear to be so poor, it's because of the IMF. The IMF is the one that helps them stimulate the economy. It helps them to grow the economy. And in return, they pledge their support and comply with all requirements that the IMF has set forth. Good evening. And individuals must understand, if you don't understand about the economization of the world, it doesn't matter what particular brand of politics you may espouse. And in most instances of politics, it's just a smokescreen. Like I'll give you an example. You know how much money individuals are making right now in this economy? Let's take Walmart for instance. Walmart is making and billions and billions of dollars, and their employees are not even paid that well. They have so many stipulations and conditions for them to work those meaningless jobs. And I know a lot of my friends who work at Walmart. I wouldn't dare disclose where or what they do, but they talk about the deplorable conditions that they work under until they can't even take a bathroom break. Why do you think they have so many cameras in Walmart? It's not because of the customers, because they want to watch their employees. Another factor for the IMF is surveillance. The IMF regularly monitors the economic and financial policies of its member countries through surveillance at the global level and in individual countries. The IMF highlights possible risks to domestic and external stability and advises member governments on needed policy adjustments. And next is the capacity development. The IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, provides technical assistance and training to help member countries strengthen their capacity to design and implement effective policies. The IMF provides technical assistance on monetary and financial policies, fiscal policy, and management, statistical data, a compilation in economic and financial legislation. A third time I'm here to ask why didn't this name change? Why do you think they didn't work on Saturday? You don't need to keep asking me. If you know the answer, then I already know why they didn't work on Saturdays. You think about it. That's not the topic today. That'll be a topic another day. So how is the IMF organized and structured? The IMF is a specialized agency of the United Nations, or the UN, that has its own staff and budget. The IMF operates according to procedures established by its Articles of Agreement. Its highest decision-making authority is the Board of Governors. All member countries are represented on the Board of Governors, usually at the finance minister or central bank governor level. The Board of Governors has delegated day-to-day authority over operational policy, lending, and other matters to the Executive Board. The Executive Board has 25 executive directors. The 5 members with the largest financial commitment to the fund or billionaires, trillionaires, the United States, Japan, China, Germany, and the United Kingdom, appoint their own executive directors. The other executive directors are elected, usually by groups of member countries. The board makes decisions through voting. Each member's voting share is weighed on the basis of its core financial contributions to the fund, called quotas. A member's quota share broadly reflects its weight in the global economy. Larger economies have larger quotas. Major policy decisions require 85% of the total voting share, with a voting share of 16.9%. The highest of any fund member, the United States, can unilaterally veto major policy decisions. Most day-to-day decisions at the IMF, such as approving individual programs, require 50% of the voting share. Why is this important to know? Unless you know the inner workings of an organization and how they work, you don't know why they do what they do. Like the global stock market, it's manipulated every single day. The gambling industry is manipulated every single day. Individuals don't realize our politicians are elected based upon how well the IMF has decided how advantageous that individual can be to the organization. Money makes the world go around, make no mistake about it. Without it, meaning money, individuals can't buy, trade, or sell. Oftentimes, individuals are so desperate for money until they think if they just do any and everything to get it, not realizing that if you're not a part of the clique, if you're not in the know, if you're not a part of a certain organization, you will pay the price. The next aspect is the managing director of the IMF, who is selected by the board of directors for a 5-year renewable term. The current managing director, Kristalina Georgieva, was reelected to a second 5-year term in October 2024. The IMF has a staff of about 3,100 people and it's headquartered in Washington, D.C. Isn't that something? The central hub of Washington is where the IMF is located. And most people have never heard of the IMF because they're busy with their lives doing the things that they have to do to survive. And the IMF has financial assistance programs, which are arguably its most prominent function. The IMF's main source of funds for its lending operations is the General Resource Account, or the GRA. GRA resources currently total $1.3 trillion, more than a threefold increase from $342 billion in 2000. Member countries decided to increase IMF resources in response to a series of major economic crises over the 15 years, including the global financial crisis, 2008 to 2009, the Eurozone debt crisis, 2010 to 2015, and the COVID-19 pandemic, 2020 to 2023. Notice, these were three major events that occurred and affected the stabilization of the world's economy. That's why stimulus checks were given out. Most people thought stimulus checks were given out simply because they were just to help people. No, the stimulus checks were given out for people to spend the money to revitalize the economy, to make it stable again, because the economy had tanked or crashed or faltered, was basically going bankrupt during the COVID-19 pandemic. Most individuals did not even understand why things were happening. I could walk through downtown where I live and you saw nothing but help wanted signs everywhere. Today you go downtown, you can't even find one help wanted sign because the economy is stabilizing. Oh, people say, well, the economy is terrible. The economy is not terrible. It's not terrible for trillionaires. It's not terrible for billionaires. It's not terrible for politicians. It's not terrible for the sports industry or the entertainment industry. It's not terrible for the stock market. Individuals on an individual basis and level who work from 8 to 4 or 12 to 8 or from 9 to 5. They're the ones who are feeling the blunt of the trickle down. We call trickle down economics. Remember, so I talked about that. So this is really important. Member financial commitments to the IMF are lines of credit extended to the IMF, 3 distinct mechanisms, including 1, quotas, the financial commitment that all members are required to make. 2, like to use a religious term in the church world, individuals, their commitment must be tithes and offerings and love offerings and things of that nature. Two, supplemental multilateral fund called the New Arrangements to Borrow, known as NAB, which is funded by a voluntary subset of IMF members, and three, bilateral bargaining arrangements, which countries vulnerably negotiate directly with the fund. And what we need to understand, ladies and gentlemen, when you see politicians traveling overseas, especially into the continent of Africa, it has nothing to do with humanity. It has to do with money. That's what it's all about. Money is the name of the game. Money makes the world go round. You can try to spiritualize it any way you want to. Money is spiritual before it becomes natural. That's another lesson I'll deal with another time. What are individuals hooking up for when they get involved in a relationship? Before they can even establish who they are, the first thing a woman wants to know, how much money are you going to spend on me? Young boy's like, well, what are you talking about? I just met you. We're only going out for dinner. And you talking about getting your hair done, getting your nails done, paying your cell phone, etc., etc., etc. When individuals are getting engaged and are thinking about getting married, what's the first thing that the woman wants to do? She wants her name on every bank account that exists, because she wants to know how much money this billionaire has and how much she can get if they break up. That's why our prenuptial agreements are made for high profile people, because it can't all be about the emotions. One high profile athlete, I won't name him, he refused to sign a prenuptial agreement. His accountants told him, his lawyers told him, his friends told him, his agent told him. He would not listen. As a matter of fact, he ripped up the prenuptial agreement, and she was ever so happy. And right now, he's in court, and she's asking for $50 million and hasn't even been married to the young man for 6 months. How foolish. He could have protected himself and his assets. Emotions can sometimes become dangerous, become dangerous when individuals are led by their emotions and not by their mind. That's why agreements are important, contracts are important, negotiable talks are important, listening sessions are important, because what exactly are you saying? When people go to get loans, you need to take the time to read the fine print in the agreement. If you don't want to read it, get someone who loves to read every aspect of that contract before you sign it. Why do you think it takes so long for acquisitions of athletes and people to come to basketball teams or football teams, et cetera, because the lawyers are in negotiation with their lawyers, and they got to make sure that everything lines up proportionally and correct. It's a real serious game. The U.S. financial commitments account for 14.5% of the total GRA resources, including $112 billion in quota commitments and about $76 billion committed to the NAB. The IMF also serves as the trustee for more targeted funds. For example, listen, the Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust provides concessional loans to low-income countries, and the Resilience and Sustainability Trust provides long-term financing for countries undertaking reforms related to climate change and pandemic preparedness. It's important that so-called poverty-stricken countries, they come under this heading. The Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust provides concessional loans, meaning they have to agree to give up, in instances, your natural resources, which are very plentiful, in exchange for us coming in and stabilizing the economy and offering military protection and etc. This is real. Maybe this is something that people don't want to talk about. There is no season and holiday if you don't have money to make it happen. And if you think it's a game, go say Merry Christmas to the store owner, if that's what you celebrate. The holiday season used to be the most profitable season of the year for all the manufacturers that were in business, whether they agreed with it or not. Gimbals, Warnermakers, Macy's, Marshalls, Lit Brothers, all these great stores down through that existed for over 100 years or more. Every year they put on fabulous parades and light shows and things of that nature because it lures people into the stores and entices them to buy with the music. And this is really important. So let me read that paragraph again. The IMF also serves as a trustee for more targeted funds. For example, the Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust provides concessional loans to low-income countries, and the Resilience and Sustainability Trust provides long-term financing for countries undertaking reforms related to climate change and pandemic preparedness. Since 2000, the level of IMF financial assistance has fluctuated from a low of $12 billion in 2008 to a high of nearly $250 billion in 2012. As of November 14, 2025, the IMF had 21 active programs totaling $115 billion. The largest are Mexico, who received $24 billion. Argentina received $20 billion, and Ukraine received $16 billion. That's why you keep hearing talking about Ukraine ending the war. It's costly. And if the IMF was not helping them, they would not be able to fight the war that they've been doing over these past several years. Some experts have raised questions about the effectiveness of IMF lending, including whether IMF lending encourages risky financial decisions by governments, quote, moral hazard, end quote. There are also questions about the soundness of the policy reforms attached to IMF programs and the level of IMF lending over the past 2 decades. Other experts argue that the IMF programs, by limiting the spillover of economic crises to other countries, play an important part in stabilizing the global economy. Now I want to talk about the U.S. policy in Congress as relates to the IMF. U.S. membership in the IMF is authorized in the Bretton Woods Agreement Act, or BWAA. 22, United States Code subsection 286 at sequel. The BWAA establishes the Department of the Treasury as the lead agency managing U.S. participation in the IMF. The Department of Treasury is the most important department within the government. Because without the Department of Treasury, you have no money to run the country, the nation, and you can't help the world. Congress also shapes U.S. policy at the IMF through a variety of tools, including 1. Authorization and appropriation of U.S. financial commitments to the fund. 2. Legislation directing U.S. representatives at the IMF to advocate and vote for or against specific programs and policies. 3. Legislation requiring reports from the Department of the Treasury or fund activities. And 4. Senate confirmation of U.S. representatives to the fund or U.S. governor, elected director, and their alternates. So why is the IMF rather so important? Well, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, has reaffirmed U.S. support for the IMF while highlighting the need for reforms to maximize its effectiveness. Secretary Bessent has emphasized that the institution should, for example, refocus on its core mandate of microeconomic stability, strengthen the conditionality required for IMF loans, push back against unsustainable lending practices by some creditor countries, and limit administrative expenses. In 2023, the IMF Board of Governors approved a doubling of IMF quota resources with a corresponding reduction in the NAB. and bilateral borrowing arrangements for the United States, congressional authorization is required to increase U.S. quota and decrease NAB contributions. To date, Congress has not passed such legislation, and the overall reform package cannot be implemented without U.S. participation. The Biden administration included congressional authorization to enact these reforms in its FY 2025 budget request, as did the Trump administration for FY 2026. The Trump administration nominated Secretary Bessent to be the U.S. governor of the IMF in April 2025. The nomination is pending before the Senate. The administration to date has not nominated candidates for alternate governor, executive director, or alternate executive director. Currently, the positions are filled by Treasury staff in an acting capacity. So, what is the broader U.S. foreign policy interest? IMF programs and policies also relate to a number of foreign policy issues of interest to some members of Congress. For example, one, Ukraine. The IMF extended a 4-year, $15 billion program to Ukraine in March 2023. The trajectory of the war in Ukraine or a potential future settlement could affect the country's economic situation and possibly the terms of the IMF program. Number 2, Russia. In the fall of 2024, the IMF indefinitely postponed its first planned official visit to Russia since the start of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine in 2022. Several economic countries reportedly objected to the visit. 3, Taiwan. Legislation that will require U.S. representatives at the IMF to support Taiwan membership at the IMF, House Record 1910, 119th Congress passed the House and is pending before the Senate. Similar legislation passed the House in the 118th Congress, House Record or HR 540. Let's talk about the West Bank and Gaza. The IMF does not lend to Palestinian entities in the West Bank and Gaza because the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or the PLO, generally known in international fora as, quote, Palestine, end quote, or, quote, State of Palestine, end quote, is not an IMF member. The IMF can provide technical services in the West Bank and Gaza and has an IMF resident representative office for the West Bank and Gaza in Jerusalem. So let me read this disclaimer before I conclude this broadcast. Quote, these documents were prepared by the Congressional Research Service, or the CRS. CRS services as nonpartisan shared staff to congressional committees and members of Congress. It operates solely at the behest of and under the direction of Congress. Information in a CRS report should not be relied upon for purposes other than public understanding of information that has been provided by the CRS to members of Congress in connection with CRS's international role. CRS reports as a work of the United States government are not subject to copyright protection in the United States. Any CRS report may be reported or be reproduced and distributed in its entirety without permission from CRS. However, as a CRS report may include copyrighted images or material from a third party, you may need to obtain the permission of the copyright holder if you wish to copyright or otherwise use copyrighted material, end quote. So hopefully this has been enlightening today. I'm going to take a quick break and get ready for the next segment. So if you've been to the channel and you like what we do over here, kindly subscribe. Thank you for watching. Never surrender, never quit.